Hello, friends. It's been too long since I've been able to come back and work on telepathy and the etheric vehicle. There have been severe computer problems, and with all the usual, this computer has to be replaced, which is an ordeal in itself. So we are beginning program number 6, and today is the 21st of October and 2021, and we're beginning from page 11. We've reached the new section, but I do want to take a look at what we have looked at so far. And basically, we've been looking at the reason for failure in impressing the mind and also impressing the brain. So the first, we have studied this, and I don't want to go over it too extensively. It tells us that there are streams of emanating energy which can rebuff or repulse that which seeks to make contact, such as the directed thought of someone seeking rapport, and that can be the master himself or some higher agency. And when these streams coming forth from the recipient agent are adequately strong, they act as a boomerang and return to the emanating center, being attracted back there by the power of the vibration which sent them. And then he tells us this is the cause of failure in the telepathic process. The failure on the part of the broadcasting or transmitting agent. Now, as a result of that agent's, the transmitter's, intense desire to make a satisfactory impression will attract the outgoing thought back to the transmitter. So that would be an abortive effort. And then also the failure on the part of the receiving agent, whose own intense desire to be successful, may I say, it's always this intense desire which is getting in the way, whose own intense desire to be successful sends out such a stream of outgoing energy that the stream of incoming energy is met and blocked and driven back. Or if the receiver is aware of this and seeks to stem the tide of his desire, he frequently succeeds in surrounding himself with a wall of inhibited desire, which nothing can penetrate. So we see the reasons for failure, that the reasons that from one end or another thwart the telepathic process. So that gives us a little background. It's always, there's no telling when one has a chance to listen to these in sequence. So the little segues can be useful just to give us a refresher. Now we're into a new section. Looks like it goes about 5 pages, and it's called Telepathic Work. Right. Just want to make sure that there's so many little things to make sure of. It seems, may I say, such a remote possibility that we could become truly telepathic, but DK reminds us that the human being is naturally telepathic and stops. Here's her own telepathic transmission or reception as a result of the condition of the desire body, and sometimes the condition of the mental body, filled as it is with illusions, which are basically misinterpretations. They're in this book, or in the book Glamour World Problem, rather, there are 7 reasons for illusion. And we must learn to avoid every one of them, which is a demanding task upon a liberated, subjective type of observation. So anyway, we're back and working at this. Telepathy, says the Tibetan, and its allied powers will only be understood when the nature of force, of emanations, and radiations, and of energy currents is better understood. Allied powers. Because telepathy, in this conscious sense, is for a purpose. It's not just the solar plexus telepathy. It's not even the telepathy of the lower mind that is still within the grasp of the personality. These two cause all kinds of repellent and non-receptional conditions. And apparently, we are still rather far from understanding the nature of force, of emanations, and radiations, and of energy currents. Now, this will be better understood, all this, as a result of DK's series of bridging treatises towards the knowledge of the New Age, and they are on their way. Somewhere within, as the time is now, in another 4 years or so. We cannot say exactly when, but as DK says, around the year 2025, they will appear. And this statement of his kind of gives the lie to all those people who well-meaningly think they are channeling the Tibetan right now, the way Alice Bailey did. It is not really happening, and 96%, we're told, of what is brought through is from the subconscious mind of the one working as, so he or she thinks, an apparent receiver. And then, of course, as I've said, the Eastern student is more sensitive to this kind of impression and less in the way. This leaves very little, which is real channeling of the master, and it leaves great room for error. So when you come upon people who say they are channeling Master DK, the way Alice Bailey did, bringing through a high grade of mental telepathy, the time is not yet. They are anticipating something that will occur probably with an already selected disciple who is already in incarnation as the intended amanuensis for the master. That is, if he works in the way he has in the past. Even if he has all of the technology that we have at our disposal, instead of a kind of shorthand like Alice Bailey used, and just a simple typewriter, still there is a problem. And these problems naturally cannot be the sole attention, or cannot be given to the SOLE, the only attention by the master. They need someone anchored on the physical plane, this would be my estimation of this, someone anchored on the physical plane to bring through that which originates on a still higher plane. So then, going on with the Tibetan, about this grasping and this understanding, this is rapidly coming about as science penetrates more deeply into the arcana of energies and begins to work as does the occultist in the world of forces. Now, we may want to remind ourselves that the Tibetan said that the true occultist is found upon the fifth ray. That's what he seems to be saying. Let's see if I can get this straight. Yep, apparently I've got it now. The arcana of energies. When something is arcane, we do not readily and without study and without much experience understand it. It is deeply recessed and has to be somehow deeply understood. And maybe that's why Madame Blavatsky wanted to call her esoteric section of the Theosophical Society by the name the Arcane School. And that's what Alice Bailey did take up as a continuation of Madame Blavatsky's intentions. After all, they were both working, though in different ways, under the impression of the same master. I think, well, maybe Blavatsky was younger a bit older in years than the Tibetan was, but still he was her teacher when she went to Tibet and established an important contact with him. So, anyway, even then, when this was being written, maybe let's say 90 years ago, there was an improvement already in humanity's understanding of these esoteric forces. It was being better grasped, and that was a very good thing, but not yet grasped sufficiently, as now we have the chance to grasp it. Okay, a little more now. The Tibetan says, it should also be borne in mind, that means to be carried in the mind. To born is to to be born in this way is to bear, to uphold, to carry. So, going on with the Tibetan, it should also be borne in mind that it is only as the centers employed are consciously used that we have that carefully directed work which will be fruitful of results. Now, I want to add that these centers are activated according to the stage of development of the individual or even of the group, and according to the monadic ray of the individual. There is a correct ascent and activation which occurs as the energy ascends this Jacob's ladder of points of tension. So for some people, maybe most people, the third ray point of a triangle will be sufficiently activated early. And for others, the second ray will occur in its activation, and the center involved and representing the second ray will occur just about at the same time as the third ray. These, when I talk about things like this, as I understand it, these are the arcana of energies and of the world of forces. We might say that the first ray is always the last to be activated, but in the case of first ray monads, it has an earlier activation than is the case with others. Now, he'll give us an example here. There are centers which are being employed, and they are consciously used, and so can be deemed to be directing agencies and also receiving agencies. Now, I want to insert that I do like it when he gives examples, and maybe that's true of all of us, when we can see how something is really working out, then we translate the Tibetan's abstractions into actualities. So the Tibetan goes on. For instance, an emotional person using primarily the solar plexus will be endeavoring to enter into rapport with a mental type? Well, from this, the Tibetan says, um, will result only confusion. From this will result only confusion. We have to have some kind of alignment, some kind of matching of energy impressions and of the condition of the astral body and really other aspects of the personality as sensitive receivers. So, going on with DK, he says, it should also be borne in mind that it is only as the centers employed are consciously used that we have that careful, directed work which will be fruitful of results. Now, the masters are capable of that careful, directed work, and we are attempting, hovering on the periphery of the ashram. We are intending as well to learn okay. So, for instance, an emotional person using primarily the solar plexus will be endeavoring to enter into rapport with a mental type, and from this will result only confusion. Okay. Okay, I want to. That was a meditation. Okay. Let's see if I can get this correct. Okay. And let's see. He promises us confusion. So let's see if having a little trouble here. And my hope is to, yeah. Okay. The two parties concerned are using different centers and are sensitive to certain types of force and closed to others. I think I can even continue that idea. Again, some people, even if mentally polarized, and, well, I like to say at first, mentally focused, polarization, the Tibetan tells us, is a very specific thing taken on between the second and third initiations as a result of successfully passing the temptations in the desert. But sometimes he uses the term mentally polarized a bit more loosely. We have to tell or recognize when he is being very specific and when he is being more general. So this is, I think, a more general statement. Again, some people, even if mentally polarized and therefore sensitive to similar vibrations, attempt to make a telepathic contact when one party is under emotional strain and therefore not responsive, or one party is intensively occupied with some mental problem and is encased in a wall of thought forms. You can see, therefore, how a cultivation of detachment is a necessary qualification for success in telepathic work. It's not always going to be successful. So, emotional strain, may I say, is a form of blockage, as is also intense mental preoccupation. I'll kind of yeah, give the idea there. We can't get through under such circumstances. And so basically he's saying, look, you cannot become obsessed with your intention to be successful. It will happen at first, sometimes, and not others. And even for those who are well practiced in the art of impressing, it will sometimes be successful and not otherwise. And so he advises a cultivation of detachment if we want to be truly successful eventually. So he's giving us, may I say, many reasons why our natural telepathic tendencies do not work. But I can also say that when love and harmony prevail, and when we are not excessively under the sway of love, not love, but glamour, excuse me, and under the sway of the lower mind, then the opportunity to learn and to be successful in the process is much more present. I can see, can't you, that a lot of training is going to be necessary, and that when the master is in physical incarnation, as he, from all reports, will be one of the initially externalizing masters, we will be under closer supervision and will be therefore wisely advised at close hand. I guess I might add that an attitude of patience is very necessary. It's something, this telepathic sensitivity, to be more and more fully developed, is something I suspect that will not occur during the incarnation that one hears about it as a desirable state. It will take a careful following of the master's suggestions. So, detachment. Am I upset because the impression did not come through to me? Am I upset because the impression that I was intending to make upon another or upon a group did not get through? If so, those very conditions add to the unlikelihood of the successful carrying through of the process. Now, it comes to me, and was it Alice Bailey who said so, or someone in the know on these things, that there were days when the Tibetans simply could not work with Alice Bailey. She was afflicted with too much lower manas to carry through or to be impressed by the kinds of perspectives that the Tibetan was intending to impress upon her. Now, if that can happen to Alice Bailey, who was, trained from long ages ago to be en rapport with the Tibetan's mind when he or she was a chela in the light, and he was the advising, supervising disciple, probably under the influence of Master K.H., then it can happen to anyone. So, okay, didn't work this time. Okay, but it will work. And that's where our sense of detachment from the perspective of the soul does enter. I think we can see, can we not, how much the quality of patience is required in the or for the success of this process. And let us face it, we are beginners, at least compared to the kind of telepathy which the hierarchy has developed. Okay, a bit more here. All who seek to tread the path of discipleship are endeavoring to live in the head center. Well, he tells us that even earlier. If your meditation is not successful, it's because you cannot focus your consciousness really in the causal body, in the egoic lotus, with its potentially direct connection to the head center, with its interior super centers, and with its series of centers above the head that the Tibetans sort of feathered head apparatus represents. So we certainly are not wanting to live in the solar plexus. We are endeavoring to live in the head center, making a truer type of observation possible, living in the head center. And the Tibetan goes on through meditation to bring in the power of the soul. Okay. This is the truth of the matter, and If we find it to be so, in our case, then we are proceeding correctly. But do you know it to be so? Maybe ardent, dedicated students of Master DK do tend to be oriented in such a way as to live in the head center. They are always being accused of being too mental. So there is perhaps, although it is a misunderstanding, it's an indication that these students, many of whom individualized on the moon chain or even earlier in the previous major solar system, are attempting, endeavoring to live in the head center, and are perhaps under advisement conducting their meditation increasingly within the egoic lotus, which itself is not easy. When you do that, it's a bit like entering into the aura of the ashram. I would say unless we can conduct our meditation uh, really and practically within the egoic lotus, we cannot achieve that state which is known as Shela within the aura. Now, here DK is telling us about the problem that we face as disciples, learning telepathic sensitivity. I think, don't you think so, that it's a good idea not to be overly optimistic, to be reasonably optimistic because we're being well instructed, but not to think that we're dealing with the easiest thing here to develop over time a true group telepathy. It's a matter of patience. And we can imagine that the masters who now have this capacity have worked long and hard over a number of lives developing this. I guess we try to be in a hurry, and sometimes that's just a question of the ambitious personality running the show. It's just kind of a spiritual ambition from which we have to learn to release ourselves. And I don't know of anybody who has not passed or is passing or will pass through that stage of spiritual ambition. Now, patience will overcome that. As Siddhartha in the Hesse book by that name, Siddhartha, said, I can think, I can wait, I can fast. Well, thinking tells us something about his focus within the head, waiting about his patience. It tells us something about his patience. And fasting, in its several meanings, tells us of an attitude of detachment. Sometimes authors, well, we don't know whether they are occultists or not, but they are able to enter into the principles of the occult world. And I think the German author Hermann Hesse was one of those. So you sense, don't you, the kind of training that we are going through. Yes, a training which is going to take from us all we have to give of intelligence and will and love and a refusal to jump to conclusions that, in fact, now I am trained. It may not at all be so. The problem, says DK, which you face as disciples, and remember, he really is speaking to disciples and not the so much the outer aspirants who have to carry out what the disciples suggest or who would be wise to do so. So, we ask, are we disciples learning telepathic sensitivity? The problem is founded on two things, he says. And now let's I'm quite sorry I managed to pull something here in my rib cage, and it's not going away fast. The problem which you face, and may I add, which presumably all of us who are serious face as disciples, learning, just learning telepathic sensitivity is founded on two things. Okay, A, upon which of your three bodies, of course, in the personality, upon which of your three bodies is the most active? Because let me say that activity can be blinding. We all know the idea that when you are hyper engaged and busy and easily distractible, it's very difficult to concentrate. So our problem is based upon which of the three bodies, our three bodies, is most active. Thereby is indicated where you live subjectively most of the time. And again, based on DK's use of words, whether general or specific, I would like to reserve the word subjectivity um, to pertain to the soul, and subtlety to pertain to the mental, emotional, and etheric bodies. So I think with DK's approval, I would say there is indicated where you live subtly most of the time. Let's pause for a moment and see if we can find where that might be. Because, engagement with habitual customary activities is a block, or certainly can be a block. So that's number one. And have you discovered what that is in your own case? Are you primarily the emotional disciple? Or, is your tendency towards emotionality more than it should be for one who truly is becoming a disciple? Or are you involved in mental agitation, always thinking about something? Sometimes those who have a pronounced third ray have that particular problem. So that's number one. Then point B, upon which center is the most expressive in your equipment, presumably personality equipment, which is the most expressive in your equipment and through which you contact most easily modern living conditions. I mean by these words where, literally speaking, your life energy is predominantly focused, and your sentient, and may I add, feeling, uh, and your sentient energy expresses itself the most. Okay, so these are our problems. So the first one involves bodies, and the second involves chakras or centers, and maybe not just the etheric centers, maybe astral or mental centers, as each one of those vehicles has its higher correspondences to the chakras which are found on the ordinary etheric level. When we get to the higher mental plane, the petals of the egoic lotus are temporarily taking the place of the chakras. There's a lot of question here about location. Where is the word? So these are problems. And they involve a knowledge of personality body activity and a knowledge of chakras, um, especially within the body that is most active, but not excluding the other bodies which are correlated with it. Now, DK goes on and tells us that an understanding of this will make you better able to work and to make intelligent experiments. Therefore, watch yourselves with care, impersonally, or as Roberto Assagioli told us, as if you were a scientist observing dispassionately what was happening. It's interesting that we have to watch with care even while adopting a certain don't care attitude, a certain growing divine indifference. So therefore, watch yourselves with care, yet impersonally. That covers what I just said. And DK goes on, and work out the why and the wherefore of the effects produced, for by this means you will learn. Don't we notice how observant we have to be? Yet, withal, detached. And maybe this is the reason a student asked me just the other day, are you suggesting that we keep the kind of spiritual diary which DK was recommending to his gathered students that were to participate in the work he had in mind? Yeah. And I said, yes, I am recommending that. To keep a record of your observations. Well, we call it a spiritual diary. And we learn thereby where the majority of our thought is focused. And we learn about the degree of our identification with our personality vehicles and with the group personality. We note that we're supposed to work out the why and the wherefore, and we are the ones who are growing because of having done that. So let's ask ourselves, do I have the patience, the obedience for real occult training? Okay. Now we've had solar plexus telepathy. We've had a kind of mental telepathy, both of those largely transferring in an unconscious manner certain limitations. And now we're into something else. The third type of telepathic work is that from soul to soul. This is the highest type of telepathic work possible to humanity, and I might add, at this time, the highest type of telepathic work subject to humanity, and is that form of communication which has been responsible for all the inspirational writings of real power. Because we're dealing with the second aspect of divinity, I'm going to put it in that color. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have a soul ray that is the second, but the soul is the second aspect, generically, regardless of what its ray may be. I guess DK is also suggesting that there are inspirational writings, or those which masquerade as such, which do not have real power. And surely we have all witnessed them these days as people hold their tablets out and say, "This is what the master said to me." It's based on an error, I think. And basically, it comes from, I think, what DK calls the nice subconscious mind of the supposed recipient. The world scriptures, the illumined utterances, the inspired speakers, and the language of symbolism, it only becomes possible when there is an integrated personality and at the same time the power to focus oneself in the soul consciousness, the mind and the brain, at the same time to be brought into perfect rapport and alignment. Well, I think that's, in a way, a continuation of what we just looked at. Soul, mind, brain. And then world scriptures, which have been so influential, illumined utterances, inspired speakers, and the language of symbolism. Yes. Then and only then can these powerful, inspirational writings come through. Okay, friends, I had to take a little break there. Anyway, the third type of telepathic work is the highest, at least given the state that we are now in. And then, lower than that, something to do with the mind itself, and telepathic work to do with the emotions. But the really powerful telepathic work are coming from a soul inspiration. And let's say from soul to soul, as the story goes. Okay. So, and it only is possible when there is a soul mind brain alignment. We have seen that errors can occur through the over anxiousness of the impressing agent and the over anxiousness of the receiving agent. And that's why we have to learn to work with detachment. We have here, well, it's very clear what we have. An integrated personality, and at the same time, says the Tibetan, the power to focus oneself in the soul consciousness. The mind and the brain have at the same time, I guess, which is rare for us at this particular stage of our development, to be brought into perfect rapport and alignment. I guess Master DK is being very clear about this. Now, there's a bit more. And I have a program coming up, so I may be able to do a little bit. DK goes on to say, it is my intention to elucidate further this science of communication. And may I suggest it's very Geminian in nature, as so many of those in Alice Bailey's circle, including herself, were endowed with that Gemini energy, including Foster Bailey and some others. So DK is saying, it is my intention to elucidate further this science of communication, which started through the sense of touch and developed through sound, symbols, words, and sentences, writing, art, and on again to the stage of higher symbols, vibratory contact, telepathy, inspiration, illumination. Well, we see the progression, don't we? I have, however, he says, in the above, dealt with the general outline, and we will take up the specific details later. Somehow, we have to learn to be in touch with each other without interference, and to deal with what Master Moria calls the lightning of thought. The lightning of thought. Interesting that it all begins with the sense of touch, which is, in a way, the middlemost sense of the common three: hearing, touch, and sight. And how we communicate via words and symbols and sentences and outer languages, writing, art, and so forth, onto those stages where higher symbols and vibratory contact and telepathy and inspiration and illumination are all to be found. There are some astrological signs involved here. Inspiration is under the control of Sagittarius. Illumination at this stage of the developmental process is under the influence of Scorpio. Telepathy, as I say, has a strong Geminian quality to it. Okay. I'm just not knowing how much I can do here before other things call to me. The work of the telepathic communicators, now, may I add, that's the first seed group, which he did organize entirely, all 9 people. The work of the telepathic communicators is one of the most important in the coming new age. Spiritual telepathy. This is also what it can be called. And it will be of some value to gain some idea of its significance and techniques. May I add, we just have generalities so far. But he goes on to say, I would, in summarizing the above instruction, state that in connection with individuals, now, we look forward to these summaries, because they help us codify, solidify his teaching in our minds. So telepathic communication is between soul and mind, and between soul, mind, and brain. All right, that's one way it works. It may not get through all the way to the brain, and that's our task, to make sure that it does come through all the way to the brain. Then the externalization process is really advancing. Now, he says that this is as far as interior individual development is concerned. So, he's not dealing just with what he just reviewed about how it all begins with the sense of touch. He's taken it here to a more advanced stage. I think for many of us, the impression may come to the mind, but the quality of the brain cells, as we have been told, is insufficiently sensitive to allow it to be transmitted to the brain. Now, going a little further, he's talking about, in summarizing the above instruction. Number 2, when found between individuals, telepathic communication is between soul and soul. That's the highest point. Between mind and mind. Sorry for that. And between solar plexus and solar plexus. And therefore purely emotional. And between all these three aspects of energy simultaneously, as in the case of very advanced people. So that's interesting point. All three simultaneously. And I'll kind of emphasize this last one particularly. Very advanced people. Who are they? Who are they? Are they disciples? Are they initiates? Do we have experience receiving simultaneously, soul to soul, mind to mind, solar plexus to solar plexus telepathy. From others, and all of them together. I know your soul perspectives. You have communicated to me your mental perspectives and your feeling nature, how you feel about what has been communicated. That also comes across. Is that so for us? See, when we say to each other, well, I know how you feel, but does it also mean I know what you are thinking? And also, your soul perspective on the whole situation. Does that come across to us? So we're getting a summary here, which can be, I think, very helpful. Telepathic communication is also between a master and his disciples or disciple, between a master and his group, and a group or groups of sensitives and aspirants on the physical plane. Yes, the master can even get through to the physical plane. Between subjective and objective groups, and between the occult hierarchy and groups of disciples on the physical plane. Oh, it is extensive. And E. Between the hierarchy and the new group of world servers in order to reach humanity and lift it nearer the goal. Now I'm going to use the indigo color because we are here dealing with the subjectivity of the master and the hierarchy. And at this time, the second ray, the soul ray of our planet, and the soul ray of our solar logos is the most subjective ray. The master does try to get through telepathically, and so does the hierarchy with respect to disciples on the physical plane, and so does the hierarchy with respect to the new group of world servers. And, let's ask, are we aware of this? Are we aware of these communications? Sometimes DK says to his students, I have helped you. Have you been aware of my presence? Now, that's not because he wants recognition. It's because if recognition exists, it tells the student something. It teaches the student something of value. Do we see how many points there are here? Not just soul to mind and soul to mind to brain, but soul to soul, mind to mind. This is in some ways more horizontal, solar plexus to solar plexus. All of this. And simultaneously, putting it bluntly, we just get more and more sensitive to each other, more and more sensitive to each other. The members of the hierarchy are exquisitely sensitive to each other. Okay, a little more. All this, right? The Tibetan goes on. This concerns the new science of group telepathic communication. Well, I might say new to us in terms of handling it in a conscious and intelligent manner. This concerns the new science of group telepathic communication. DK goes on, of which herd or mass telepathy, so well known, is the lowest known expression. This instinctual telepathy is shown by a flight of birds acting as a unit, or that animal telepathy which serves to govern so mysteriously the movements of herds of animals and the rapid transmission of information among the, he calls them, savage races and non-intelligent peoples. These are all instances of that lower externalization of an inner spiritual reality. I have seen this at work in terms of herds of animals, and I think we've all seen the flights of birds occurring as if they all received the same signal to keep their formation and go in a proper direction. I think I mentioned this earlier, but in Texas and areas like that, there are problems with feral pigs, and sometimes they are trapped. And there comes a moment when they all seem to realize that they are trapped. And they all, a pandemonium breaks loose, and they are all simultaneously trying to get out of the trap. But of course, it's useless because then the hunters have them. So we're dealing with instinctual telepathy, the flight of birds acting as a unit, animal telepathy, and the rapid transmission of information among what he calls the savage races. It's interesting that word savage, I think it's from a French word which is close to wisdom, sauvage. And it did not have a pejorative meaning at first. It had to do with some kind of natural wisdom of the people who were closer to the earth. Now he goes on to say, an intermediate stage of this instinctual activity, based largely on solar plexus reactions, can be seen in modern mass psychology and public opinion. I mean, let me add, suddenly people are all, many of them, believing the same thing. And it has not necessarily been communicated to them person by person. DK goes on to say, it is, as you know, predominantly emotional, unintelligent, astral, and fluidic in nature, but may I add, very effective, because he tells us that according to public opinion, things will be done or not done. It is a great power. So that's one kind of public opinion, and not the highest either. Now, DK is noting our progress when he says that this is changing rapidly and shifting into the realm of what is called intelligent public opinion. I mean, may I add, the people are thinking together, not just swayed by something they feel. So it's called intelligent public opinion, but this is, says the Tibetan, as yet slow. It involves the activity of the throat and ajna centers. Well, we're moving in that direction. But as we can see in certain countries, people are very much swayed by unintelligent public opinion. And when they think together, they think in a manner detached from reality. They think conspiratorially. Well, when I say reality, I mean the lower form of reality. This is not about the solar plexus. It's about the throat and ajna centers, the throat center being that which humanity primarily represents within the circumference of Sanat Kumara's influence, and the ajna center being that center occupied by the new group of world servers. So, what do we have? We have, therefore, three types of telepathy. And I think it's very important that we understand when we are subject to any one of these particularly. Okay. We have instinctual telepathy. We do not control it. We have mental telepathy. We may begin to control it. We have intuitional telepathy from the level of the soul, and even beyond. We are in control. So I can kind of put these in slightly different colors, just to remind us of what they represent. Instinctual, mental, intuitional. And any one of us can be the recipient of any of these. So we have to be very aware from a soul perspective of the type of telepathy which may be presently making an impression on us. Master DK goes on, I would remind you, he says, right at the outset, that sensitivity to the thoughts of one's master, sensitivity to the world of ideas, which, let us remember, really begins on the Buddhic plane and goes beyond. And the Tibetan continues, sensitivity to intuitional impressions are all forms of telepathic sensitivity. I guess I could say that we have held the idea of mental telepathy in one area only, but there are other aspects to it, and DK is helping us get a broader idea of the kind of telepathic content or contact that we can achieve. He goes on to say, in any consideration of this theme, it is obvious that three major factors must be considered. Sometimes our problem is it's just too easy to understand, or so we think. And so we don't grasp with accuracy from the soul perspective what is really happening. So three major factors have to be considered. I wonder if our minds, our perspectives are very much upon this subjective reception and the subtle personality aspects that are involved. Okay, what are these three major factors? Number one, the initiating agent. This is the Tibetan speaking. I use the word with deliberate intent as the power to work telepathically, both as initiating agent and as recipient, is closely connected with initiation. I mean, this must be how the one initiator works, how the Christ works in the initiations of the threshold. So, these both, the power to give and to receive, to impress and be impressed, are closely connected with initiation. And, says the Tibetan, is one of the indications that a man is ready for that process, i.e., that he really can receive. So this is the first of the major factors, but in relation to it, the recipient, who we are, as the candidate for initiation, naturally plays a central role. And here in the next one, it emphasizes even more this recipient. The recipient of that which is conveyed to him on the wings of thought. The master will be conveying, and the thought of even higher initiating agents, such as the Christ or Sanat Kumara, or even agents beyond, will be conveying to him. This wings of thought kind of, as I say, reminds me of Master Moria's arresting comment about the lightning of thought. And then the third point, the medium through which it is intended to convey the transfer of thought, of idea, of wish, of imprint, and therefore of some form of knowledge. I suppose the medium, given the title of this book, involves very much the ether. So we are looking to convey the transfer of thought, of Buddhic and beyond ideas, of wish. As DK sometimes says, this is my wish for you, or I could wish you were all younger and more courageous, of imprint, and therefore of some form of knowledge. What is the medium? I am aware somehow of how much fear plays in this blocking of impression through the proper medium. Anyway, we're learning more and more about the means by which telepathic impression is actually impressed. I'm glad Master DK is being simple in his expression to us about how telepathy works. And what does he say further? This is the simplest statement of the elementary mechanics of the process. The initiator or initiating agent, the recipient, and the medium. It sounds very much like thought, and that which is the means of thought and the target of the thought. So this is the simplest statement of the elementary mechanics. This likewise indicates the most necessary comprehension of the thought covered so frequently in the Bhagavad Gita, in the words which we have translated in the West by the term the knower, the field of knowledge, and the known. The field of knowledge is this substance, this etheric method of conveyance. He puts them in slightly different order. Yeah. You have oft been told that every sacred book, such as the Bhagavad Gita, and may I add, that's one of the books that DK wanted his students to, as it were, carry with them. There were several, but to have close at hand. You have often been told that every sacred book, such as the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, has various interpretations dependent upon the point in evolution of the reader or seeker. Communication and communicant still demands elucidation, and the idea which I have above conveyed to you, in that idea I have given you a hint. I guess, we're so obtuse in a certain way that we have to be often notified of the hints which have been dropped. Otherwise, we may pick them up from the mass of reading material. As DK suggests that indeed we should. Okay. Now I think this time, well, that's it. I was saying there might be time for a little more, but there isn't, and that's a good thing too, because of the program on the sacred pentagram, which is coming up. So this is the beginning of page 16, and we began on page 11. So let's see if I can get this into its proper place. Well, you can see, friends, what a study has to be made, and it would be quite enough for the student to concentrate on the particular seed group to which Master DK had assigned him. So this is program 6 for Telepathy in the Etheric Vehicle, page 21, or rather the date, and page 11 to anyway, it goes up to page 16, and we'll be beginning our next venture with Telepathy in the Etheric Vehicle, and I'll, as usual, mark XX because I just don't know when it will be possible or when I will have the stamina to do this. I guess we need an overview, don't we? There is a new means of communication. It involves impressing agent, recipient, and a medium through which the impression is sent. The thinker, his thought, and that which is the means of thought. Like I say, I'm so impressed by the idea that even to study one of these seed group methods would be quite enough for us. Well, we'll do a little bit of a review when we come back to it. The most elementary thought from the Bhagavad Gita. So what are we supposed to have in our knapsack? Bhagavad Gita, the New Testament, the crest jewel of discrimination called the Viveka Kudamani, and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. The light of the soul is the Tibetan's presentation of that great book written by one of the Patanjali sages. What was it? 10,000 years ago? Humanity has been intelligent for a long time. And sometimes when we say to ourselves, well, it's only very recently with the Greeks, let's say, that real intelligence came to humanity, we are sadly mistaken. In earlier Aryan times and in Atlantean times, great knowledge was present. And even in Lemurian times, as advanced groups that were individualized on the previous major solar system made their appearance. We have to be very grateful to Madame Blavatsky and for the Tibetan who conveyed the information to her about the history, the so largely unsuspected history of our planet, a history which seems fantastical to so many, and therefore unbelievable, and so is met with incredulity, but we shall become credulous in a positive sense of the word. We shall believe because science and historical indications will prove to us that these ancient events and trends actually did occur. So I'm eager to pick this up, but I'm also eager to go on to the program which is necessary. Okay, on we go with love and many blessings to you all.